A lot of people say right off the bat that there's no possible way that Biggie would still be on Bad Boy Records almost 30 years later. I agree, but Puff was allegedly doing crazy stuff way back when. So let's look at a few key points to see if Biggie would have got caught up. And I'll tell you what label I think he would have ended up at. And in the comments, talk about what label you think he would have went to, and if you think he would have got caught up. All the talk of Biggie over the years, and little has ever been talked about where he would have gone if he would have left Bad Boy. A lot of people, I think, just assume that if he hadn't got killed, he would have just stayed side by side with Puff. There were rumors swirling back then that right before he was killed, he was talking to those around him about leaving Bad Boy. It's easy to assume that he would have just got up and left, but I don't think that would have been the case at the time. First of all, Puff would have definitely waved some cash in front of him. There's no question about that. That alone might have convinced him to stay a little bit longer, maybe for another album, maybe even 2 more. Considering that Biggie's album Ready to Die sold around 6 million copies, and speculation was that Biggie didn't see much money from it, Puffy likely would have dropped maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million in his lap, and that might have convinced Biggie to stay around a little bit longer. Plus, they already had Big CD, Life After Death completed, so again, Puff would have probably promised them even a little bit more cash after that came out, and I think highly unlikely Big would have left Bad Boy in the late 90s because they were so hot and they were clicking and they were just, everything they were doing was working. Not to mention, it's easy to forget that Bad Boy was maybe the hottest label in the mid-90s. They were absolutely scorching, and everyone they were bringing in, all these people Puff brought in, they ended up being big stars. You could say that Puff mistreated all of them, and you'd probably be right, but he either knew how to spot talent or he was darn good at creating stars. Because you had Craig Mack, you had Mary J. Blige, and of course the list goes on and on. One of the other hot labels at the time was Death Row, and there's no possible way that he would have went there. Now, Rap-A-Lot was not mainstream enough for someone of Biggie's stature at the time, and they weren't really on the map nationally yet. But we still have to answer if Biggie would have stuck around long enough, would he been caught up in all of Puffy's garbage? Although, of course, we didn't know Biggie, he didn't seem like the kind of person that would have been involved in the stuff Puff's been accused of. Sure, he had a sketchy past, but he seemed like a gentle giant. Not a giant you'd want to mix up with, but someone, if you left him alone, he'd probably leave others alone. Personally, I think Biggie would have ended up signing with Rockefeller. And I think he would have become an even bigger star than he was with Bad Boy. If you look back, Puffy and JayZ did tracks together and they were excellent. The song they did on Biggie's Life After Death is such a clean sound. The lyrics are timeless and the beat was perfect. Almost 30 years later, that song still holds its weight. Of course, he could have signed with So So Def and Jermaine Dupri. Even though the collab they did together, JD, Brad, was fire, they had very different styles, and I don't think they would have sounded good over a long period of time. JD had more of a club sound, and I don't think Biggie would have fit in with that, or fit in with the other So So Def artists. But around that same time, JayZ was coming up. Everything he was involving himself in was turning to gold. The track Can I Get Up on his CD Hard Knock Life Volume 2 was so hot that Emil even got a record deal out of it. JayZ was the guy, and he just kept getting hotter and hotter over the years. And that brings up the next dilemma. Was JayZ involved in some of the same stuff that Puff was involved in, or allegedly involved in, as many people are now speculating? If that ends up being true, is it also possible that Biggie couldn't have dodged this scene even if he wanted to, even if he tried to? Unless he completely got out of the game for stretches at a time like Mace did? Was he doomed from the start? I don't think Biggie would have got caught up in those messes. And anyone that he was around that would have got caught up in that stuff, I tend to think he would have got out of there. Even though Puff played the part as the good guy, the savior that helped Big get away from the streets, Biggie had principles that I think Puff didn't. Puff was really good at making money and crafting an image, but Biggie was good at being who he was and not getting mixed up in the BS.